Okay, so in 2009, this guy named Ryan Dahl created Node.js. And here's a picture of him. And here's the Node.js logo that we are all familiar with. And this sentence right here was taken directly off the Node.js website. And it reads, Node.js is a JavaScript runtime built on Chrome's V8 JavaScript engine. All right, this is a nice sentence and all, but what does that even mean? Okay, so let's dig into this sentence a little bit and figure out exactly what it means. So we know Chrome is a desktop application that knows how to parse HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And off to the left-hand side, I've created a very simple HTML file, and I called it index.html. And so if we were to open this file using Chrome, the only thing that we should see on the web page is just a simple header1 tag, which reads, but what even is Node.js? We also know that we can include CSS files within our HTML files. And to do that, we just have to add a link tag and give it the name of a CSS file. We also know that we can include JavaScript files in our HTML files. And to do that, we just need to include a script tag and provide it the name of the JavaScript file that we want it to run. Okay, so the part in Chrome that lets us run JavaScript is known as the V8 engine. So what Ryan Dahl did was he took all the code that makes up the V8 engine and ripped it out of Chrome. Here I've included a screenshot to the V8 GitHub repository. And if we look closely, we can see that it's mostly written in C++ and JavaScript. So all of these, files or this entire code base collectively make up the V8 engine. So again, Ryan Dahl, he ripped out the V8 engine out of Chrome, and here's the logo for the V8 engine. And by ripping out the V8 engine, it has now become a standalone unit. And because of this, we no longer have this idea of linking CSS files or including JavaScript files via the script tag. And so what we have to do now is start shifting our thinking away from how we are used to running JavaScript inside of the browser. And so by, again, ripping out the V8 engine out of Chrome and made it essentially a standalone unit, the question now becomes, how do we include our JavaScript files in other JavaScript files? Okay, so how do we include our JavaScript files in other JavaScript files now that we have ripped out the V8 engine and essentially, again, made it a standalone unit? So the V8 engine wasn't made for this purpose. It was made to be part of the Chrome browser. So let's say we have a file named hello.js, and in that file, I've defined a simple function, say hello, and when we use this function, it just prints hello world to the console. And let's say that I also have another file called main.js. And in this file, I want to be able to use this function. So again, how can we use hello.js in our main.js file? So to solve this problem, Ryan Dahl and other contributors came up with a module system, which later came to be known as CommonJS. So to include our sayHello function in our main.js file, we need to require it, or we need to import it first. And this is what the syntax looks like. We use the require function and we give it the file name that we want to import. But before we can use this function in other files, we need to export the function. In other words, we need to make it available. And to do that, we use the following syntax: module.exports say hello. So clearly the module system, CommonJS, it is much more complicated than this simple explanation, but in a nutshell, this is what it allows us to do. It allows us to create modules, or it allows us to create files, JavaScript files, in which we can define very useful functions that we want to reuse in other files. So hello.js is a module and main.js is a module. Okay, so I think we are now ready to answer the question, what is Node.js? So after modifying the V8 engine code extensively, so here's the logo for the V8 engine, and after adding a module system known as CommonJS, so here are the two files that I created in the previous slide. And so these two files are using the require keyword and the module.exports keyword. Or in other words, these two files collectively are using the module system, which is known as CommonJS. And after adding a bunch of built-in utilities or packages or libraries, whatever you want to call them, so there are a ton of built-in packages that come with Node when you install it. But here are just a few that you may be already familiar with. So path, fs, and http. There are way more, built-in packages, and you can easily look them up by just Googling Node.js built-in packages. So all of this right here that I'm showing you collectively is referred to as Node.js. And so here I've included a screenshot of the Node.js GitHub repository. And again, if we look closely, we can see that it's mostly written in JavaScript and C++. Okay, and so here I've just created a main.js file. And in that file, I have required the fs module, which is one of the built-in packages that you get when you install Node.js. And fs is just short for file system. And when we require this module, we can, access our file system. We can create new files on our computer. We can delete files from our computer. Okay, so when we require the fs module or the fs package, what gets stored in the fs variable is essentially just a giant object. And to that object, there are a bunch of really, really useful functions attached to it. And so here I'm using one of those functions, which happens to be called read file. And all this code does is it reads the entire contents of a file, and if it encounters an error, it lets us know what that error was. Otherwise, if it was successful, it just prints the contents of the file. That's all this is doing. And now that we have finished writing our JavaScript code, we can now use Node.js to run this main.js file. So this JavaScript code that we have written in our main.js file, we can think of it as a layer that sits on top of the C++ code. C++ is doing all the hard work for us. So our JavaScript code calls our C++ code, and with the help of libuv, we can access our computer's resources. As in this example, we are accessing the file system by importing the fs module. And here I've included a screenshot of libuv. And so libuv was primarily developed for use by Node.js. So if we look really closely, we can see that it's mostly written in C. And anytime we use C is because we want to be able to access our computer's resources. So in other words, we want to be able to access the file system to read files, create files, delete files, whatever it is that we need to do. Or we can access our computer's networking features to create a server. And as I just mentioned, we can access the networking features to create a server. And to do this, we would just have to require the HTTP module, and we can start creating our own server. And so typically, this is why people want to use Node.js or want to learn how to use Node.js, because it makes it so easy to create a server, aka a RESTful API. So again, the JavaScript code that we wrote in main.js, behind the scenes, it is calling our C++ code, and with the help of libuv, we can access our computer's resources. And finally, I just want to end with something that Ryan Dahl said in one of his talks. And this is what he said. I spent my professional life in C++, Rust, and Go. Rust and Go have made low-level systems more accessible to people. But at the end of the day, I'm still scripting all the time. Maybe I have a directory of files that I need to rename. I'm not going to bust out C++ to do this. This is something that you would want to do in a scripting language. When I was growing up, I learned Perl for the first time. In some ways, I'm trying to build my Perl that I can use. And so with that, hopefully you now know what Node.js is.